Now we have our product dimension ready. We'll jump into our currency dimension. For example, we'll need the currency name in our attribute to be analyzed later on by the user. We can go now to our, for example, the employee dimension. Here also we can create some kind of hierarchy that we can select, let's say, the full name, the department name, the title of the employee, and then we can create our hierarchy. For example, we'll select our department name and then the full name under it. You can create actually multiple hierarchies if you have different needs to drill down through this data. For example, if we go to the date dimension, you can have calendar year and you can have fiscal year. So you can create a different hierarchy for different kinds of attributes by just dragging them into this area here. For now, this will do. The promotions hierarchy, I'll just do the same thing that we did before. The English promotion name, the promotion type, the promotion category. Let's just ensure that we've selected all the attributes that we need. Here in the organization dimension, for example, we can select the organization name. The department group name also will be required for the department dimension. Now that we prepared our dimensions, we'll just save it and we'll deploy our cube. We'll go back to the cube, right-click, process. It will try to deploy our project into the server. Okay, one thing to ensure is that in your properties window, under deployment, you specified the correct server here. So I'll have to change this. Click OK. Now right-click and deploy. So it will start deploying your cube into the SQL Server Analysis Services. Let's just wait for it to finish. Okay, so it will say deployment completed successfully. Now to test your cube, is it correct or not? You can right-click on your cube and say browse. Once you browse your cube, you can drag and drop any of the measures that you've already set up. For example, let's say under finance, we'll take the amount, and in the dimensions, we can take, for example, the date dimension. I want to see the quarters. So as you can see, the cube is working. We can see the amount for the quarters, and we can just drag and drop to test that whatever we've built is correct. If any data changes on your data warehouse, you'll just have to process the cube again. Usually people will just schedule a job that will process the cube every X minutes, for example. So you can process the cube either from here or from SQL Server Management Studio. So if we process it from here, it should show process succeeded. If it failed, it means there's something wrong in your setup. You'll have to go back and check that all your dimensions and measures are correct and with the correct format. So we'll just close this. Now that we've built our cube, we process the data into multi-dimensional model. We'll just recap on what we did here. Through Microsoft Visual Studio, we created a new project. We selected analysis services. From this new project, we created a data source, then created a data source view. Inside this data source view, we created some calculated columns as well. Then we built our cube. Here we can see the cube structure. The fact tables are usually in yellow and the dimension tables are in blue. Inside here, there are many different things that you can do that we didn't cover. For example, the KPIs, the partitions, perspectives. If you want, for example, for finance users to not be able to access the call center data, you can create that through perspectives and give this perspective only to finance. So you'll give the finance data mart to the finance department, the call center data mart to the call center department, and so on. You can also do some calculations from here. So you have different ways to calculate, to do like calculated columns, either from the cube itself, from the data source view, or in your ETL process. Once you extract this data, you can do some calculations on it and store them in a different column. But the main advantages of doing the calculations inside the cube or the data source view, that you don't have to create additional columns in your data warehouse structure. You can just have the calculated columns here. The difference between data source view calculated columns and the cube calculated columns, that data source view calculated columns, if you change or add them, you'll have to redeploy and process your cube, while in the cube calculated columns, you can just create your calculated columns, save them, and they will be available. My preference, I'll always use data source view calculated columns for these kind of calculations, but you're free to experiment with all the options that you have. Through the same application, actually you can use this cube to create some mining structures. We will not cover this here, but it's worth to note it at least that you can actually do some kind of data mining on the cube itself after you deploy this cube by going through mining structures. It's some kind of wizard. You select from a cube. You select what kind of a mining model you need. Time series, for example. Select the cube dimension, date, or and so on until you develop your mining model. Give it the training data, and it will give you the model, for example, for forecasting how my sales will look like in future. Now that we have the cube ready, it's the time now to go to how to give this cube to our customers so they can use it to create their own reports, so they can analyze this data and get use of it. Like we said, we'll be using two kind of tools to show you how you can give this cube to your users. We are using either Excel or Report Builder to develop some kind of reporting that we'll give to the user so he can analyze the data that's stored in the cube. Now that we have our cube deployed and processed, now it's the time to give this cube to the end user to be used for analysis purposes and decision-making process. First, to ensure that our cube is deployed correctly, we can go back to Microsoft SQL Server Management Studio. When we try to connect, you'll notice you have different types of connection that you can do. We'll select Analysis Services type, and when we connect, under Databases, you will find all the cubes that you've already created. This is our cube, BI cube. When you go through it, you'll find your data source, the data source view, the cube, and the dimensions. And what you can do here, you can create roles to give users access to this cube. So you can create an admin role, for example, or someone who can read the definitions only, or someone who can process the database, and add your users here so they'll be able to connect to this cube. Once we do that, We'll go back to Microsoft Excel, which is our first option to visualize this data. In Microsoft Excel, under the Data tab, we can see under Get External Data from Other Sources, you'll have an option to bring the data from Analysis Services. When we click on that, it will ask you for the server name and the login credentials. Here, the user will specify his login credentials to connect to this cube once you give him access. Then it will ask you to select which cube you want to use. You might have different cubes. We'll select the cube that we just created, BI cube. When we click on next, it will ask you to name this data connection file. So put whatever identifiable name to you and click on finish. After you click on finish, it will ask you how you want to view this data on your workbook. Do you want it as pivot table report, or you can choose as pivot chart and pivot table report combined? So we'll choose this option and click on OK. What you can see here, you have your fact tables listed, the fact call center, fact finance, and fact reseller sales, as well as your dimensions, which are the amount, the currency, the date, and so on. Inside each dimension, if you've already created a hierarchy, you will be able to see your hierarchy here. For example, the date hierarchy will have the year, the semester, the quarter, the month name, and day number of month, and so on. So to create our first report, what we'll do, let's take finance, for example. We'll select amount from the fact finance table. So it's showing us the total amount of all the records that we have in our cube. Now we'll select our date hierarchy, the date dimension hierarchy. And as you can see here, once we select the date hierarchy, the report itself will immediately change to add your date hierarchy to your report. And finally, we can select as well the scenario. Is it actual or budget? If, for example, we want to compare our actual values against our budgeted values, we can select the scenario name. So as you can see here, my report is ready. I have the amount, I have the year, and I can see the difference between my actual values and budgeted values. I can drill down, for example, if I want to see for 2005, I want to see one level down, the semester. Under the semester, I'll have the quarter, the third and fourth quarter. And you can notice here also the graphical report will also change. When you drill down more, you can see the months. So now we have the actual versus the budget month by month, and so on. If we have this view, we can again drill up to the year, and we have our yearly values instantly available for us. Another option, what we can do also with this cube, we can go, for example, for our call center. We want to see how many calls are we getting against how many operators do we have to handle these calls. So as you can see here, it will automatically show that at this year we have this many calls and this many total operators. If we drill down more, we'll go to the semester, then quarter, then month, and then we have a day-by-day report showing how many calls I'm getting against how many operators I have in my call center. So I can take a decision if the number of operators are enough for handling these calls. Are my calls getting more and more? For example, if we take 2010, if we have 2011 data, we can compare the number of calls we are getting at 2010 against 2011, and so on. The same thing will apply also to the reseller sales. We can give this connection to the user and ask him to develop his own report. And here comes the power of BI, that you don't have to write queries to find this kind of data, aggregate them, and represent them to the user. You can just give the user the data connection, and ask them to develop their own reports. So they don't have to come back to you every time they have new requirements. The other option we have for developing report is Microsoft Report Builder, which will give you the same facilities, except you will develop the report and give the users the report, publish it for them, so they can just specify some parameters and get the report in a fixed format if they wish. So what we'll do, we'll open Report Builder, we'll create a new data source, and we'll select the connection type as SQL Server Analysis Services. Under server name, I'll put my server name, the login credentials, and I'll select the cube that I just created. I have the connection string. I can test the connection, make sure it's successful. Then I'll create my data set. From the same data source that I created, I have the query designer option to select whatever measures I need to see, as well as whatever dimensions also I need to see. So I have the date dimension. So as you can see, this report is for finance, for example, and I select the scenario as well, the scenario name, and I click on OK. It will just write the query for me that will read from this cube. Now I can give the users the option to specify some parameters. For example, the scenario parameter as text. We can give the user a list of values that he can choose for this parameter. For example, for the scenario, we have the actual and we have the budget. Now we created our parameter. We can filter our data set based on this parameter that we just created. We'll right-click our data set, go to Dataset Properties. Under Filters, we'll add a new filter that, for example, our scenario name will equal the parameter that we've just created. So when we run this report, it will ask the user to specify the scenario. If he selected actual, first, before we do that, we'll have to create a chart through Chart Wizard. We'll select our data set. We'll select it as column type. We need to specify what are our values, what are our categories, for example, the scenario name, and we want to see the year. So we'll say next, select the style, finish, and we have our chart. Now if we run this report and specify the scenario and click on View Report, you can see the report will bring me the actual values by year. I can select the budgeted values and it will also show them by year. Here we can specify the parameters and what will be rendered in the report area based on the user requirements. Whatever the user wants to give you as parameters, whatever he wants to see, you can specify through the report builder. After you finish, you can publish this report either to a report server that is hosted on Microsoft SQL as well, or if you have a SharePoint environment, that will also be an added advantage. You can publish this report to SharePoint and give users access to it so they can run it and they can get their reports instantly. Similarly, whatever we developed in Excel as well can be published to SharePoint as a dashboard so the users can see these reports whenever they need to. Inside SharePoint, we have also other tools that can be used to analyze this data. It will give you almost the same results, but it might be easier for the user. For example, we can create a performance point dashboard This dashboard, I have one simple example here, internet sales amount by country. When we see this graph, actually inside SharePoint, you can right-click and ask for this decomposition tree. It will show like this. You can select, for example, if we selected the United States, it will decompose it for us. We can select the next level. I want to see the states. It will show you the amount of each state. The next level, when you right-click, you can select the next dimension to drill down to, and so on until you find the value that you are looking for. So that's it for this workshop. I hope you've enjoyed it, and I hope you will be able to create your BI solutions using the tools that we've learned here. I'm sure there are a lot of things that we didn't cover, but we tried to cover the basics. If you know the basics, you can dig deep into this various systems and various applications that we've used today. So you can create your BI solutions and use it for your organization. Thank you.